If you want to take a picture at that time, you wake up, you go there and you get a picture. If you stay in bed till 10 and then you want to have a picture with the sun rising, you don't deserve it.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Marketers of the Universe. My name is Tom Inniss and I'm the copywriter at Brew Digital, and I'm excited to be bringing you an episode packed with marketing insights, national optimism and just a little bit of spice. Today we're going to be talking about advertising around the Olympics, or the lack thereof, and turn our attention to the adverts we're loving and hating at the moment, or, as our resident Gen Z says, the bops and flops. There's plenty to dig into, so let's not waste any time. Set your phones to Do Not Disturb, pour yourself a big cup of coffee and buckle up, because here come the Marketers of the Universe. To kick things off, our head of digital marketing, Rich Harper, will be talking to Mark Bundle, Senior Email Marketing Manager, about the state of advertising in the build-up to the Olympics. Over to you, Rich.
So here we are today. We've got a little segment about the Olympics coming up and potentially the lack of advertising surrounding it. Currently, there's a rather big tournament going on, the Euros, and hopefully England are in the semi-finals and end to our long-standing trophy drought. But pretty much as soon as this event finishes, another global event kicks off on the 26th of July in Paris. It might be because I've been glued to the football for the past couple of weeks, but it feels like there's a distinct lack of advertising surrounding the Olympics in general. And that got us questioning whether or not this is a deliberate strategy from brands, or if there's a sense that activity is just waiting in the wings for the Euros to finish and then it's all going to kick off. Mark, in your opinion, do you agree there seems to have been a lack of Olympic ads so far, or are they there and we're just missing them at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I'm going to jump in and say that it's only 2 years since we won something, because the Lionesses won the Euros in 2022. But yeah, the men's team's horrifically long wait. But yeah, there seems to be nothing so far for the Olympics, does there? I mean, I think DFS have been running one for a little while. I think it's DFS with the Olympians on the beds. I saw one more advert for the Olympics this week, which was British Gas of all people. But yeah, no, personally, I haven't seen hardly anything. It's been really sparse. People have been focusing on the football or just general summer kind of branding.
Yeah. Do you think the reason is because we've just got a number of big sporting events happening at the moment? You know, here in the UK, we've got Wimbledon at the moment as well. We obviously all get caught up in the football hysteria when that's on. Do you think the Olympics are just waiting for that space in the kind of advertising calendar for them to start promoting their, brands to promote their campaigns? The Olympics themselves, I haven't seen too much about the actual event itself anywhere.
No, even Channel 4 normally do their bit about the Paralympics, and they come on really strong with that to kind of try and get more eyeballs on that. But I haven't seen anything on that either yet. It's been really odd. Like you say, it could be people waiting for the next slots, the same way you don't advertise Easter till you've got through Valentine's Day kind of deal. Everyone's waiting for the end of the Euros to do the Olympics, apart from Robinsons, who normally do Wimbledon. Actually, I haven't even seen that this year, saying that, on a slight tangent. So maybe just sports advertising potentially maybe just a little bit over across the board lower.
Yeah, do you think there's like a potential reason for that? Is, the Olympics for me, it's obviously a massive event, but does it still hold that same global appeal? Or is it just because at the moment, like we say, there is so much on not just sporting events, but, general elections and stuff like that as well?
Yeah, I think there's so much going on. There's only so much attention everyone's got. And like you say, there's been elections, not just here in the UK. Obviously, the American ones are coming up. In Europe, there's been plenty, and there's been a lot of debate around that, and a lot of kind of focus on which way people are going and blah, blah, blah. So there's almost like an attention deficit, and kind of brands are leaning into that going, or not leaning into it, but respecting that going, you know what? People have got enough to deal with right now. We don't want to almost occupy the same headspace as these bad things, maybe. Like, we're not going to directly say, like, do an election advertising campaign, but because there's this kind of fatigue in the air, we don't want to have our name out there at the same time and by association get kind of into that fatigue. It's, yeah, it really is odd that there seems to be a lot less than it used to be. It's a lot more just generic advertising as opposed to kind of event-specific stuff.
Yeah, it does seem that way. Then as well, let's think about, in terms of how we consume content, where we consume content, how readily available content is in terms of digital platforms, social media, that sort of thing. Do you think the way that we now are switched on, almost 24/7 to stuff happening around us, that we almost become a little bit blind to brands' advertising campaigns?
Yeah, I think you might be right, to be fair. It's hard not to be, when you're surrounded. I mean, some of the research says what we see 10,000 ads a day, I think I saw somewhere.
Yeah, there's quotes all over the place, isn't there?
Yeah.
But it's a lot.
You get different numbers, but it's a lot. And you can't process that many. Just if your headspace, you can't think of all of them.
Yeah.
There is a real fight for attention, and it's possibly only those the biggest and the best stand out right now.
Also, I read an interesting stat, just kind of doing research for this segment, that the Qatar World Cup was the most streamed sporting event in US history. And currently, according to Statista, nearly 70% of Gen Z and millennials prefer to keep up with sports on social media. Does that pose a problem for brands that we aren't, when you think of these big sporting events, we're talking about huge, massive investments, big out-of-home campaigns, TV advertising, experiential activity. The fact that if that stat is correct, 70% of that generation of people is preferring to kind of engage with stuff on social media. Yeah, does that give a problem to brands in terms of how they reach people?
Yeah, I'm probably the worst person to ask. I'm a millennial, but I am fairly social media adverse, shall we say?
Yeah.
Like I'm on a few of the older platforms, but like I don't really use Instagram. I don't really use TikTok or anything like that.
Yeah.
If that is what people are saying, and people are trying to use or keep up with sport on social media more, I guess maybe have we posed the wrong question of why is there no ads? Is it actually, are we just not seeing them? Are they advertising on social media and in the big arenas and putting all the money there? So it's just when the adverts aren't there, they're just in a different place. They've moved the money around, and it's just the TV part suffers, which is a universal thing, I guess, isn't it? The TV's viewership rates are down because of streaming.
Yeah. And I think this was, I guess, the kind of point I was trying to make was actually as well from that perspective, are we not seeing the ads because we're just not the intended audience, or we are not engaging in the social platforms with enough content that the algorithms are picking us up as likely audiences for these big brands?
Yeah, which would be a strange one, because you kind of, we're probably in the most disposable income bracket.
Yeah.
So it's the fact that you're advertising more on social media towards younger audiences who don't have so much disposable income as an interesting mind shift, kind of on its own, that advertisers would rather reach the next generation of consumers or lower spending consumers than they would go for high market stuff.
It is really interesting, and a topic that we brought up in discussion, hence why it's on the podcast. Looking into it, however, it does seem that brands are still fully behind these big events. Nike is arguably one of the biggest sports brands in the world, and they consistently make significant investments in these types of events. And looking at some reports online, the suggestions is that the 2024 games is going to be their biggest investment yet. So maybe, like we said, maybe they're biding their time and they'll make a big splash as we kind of count down in the next couple of weeks. But with these kind of big investments and the fact that not just the Olympics, but events of this type globally, think about the Super Bowl, you think about Euros, the World Cup. I'm sure there's other big sporting events, big music events, Glastonbury we've seen this weekend. How do brands, if they get behind these events and try to use them to promote themselves, how do they get the best out of their investment? Bearing in mind that they're not going to be the only ones trying to capitalize on the fact that these events are topical and in the news at the moment.
Yeah, you can't just shout loud when everyone's throwing billions of pounds at something. So it's more and more things about the creativity of brands. They've got to really understand their audiences, understand what they want, and then play to that, as opposed to just going, here is advertising, here is our product, you should enjoy it.
Yeah.
You can buy it. I guess we're asking people more, we think this will be good for you, or this will be good for you because of. It's benefit-led selling, I guess, which is kind of something we've touched on the podcast many times previously. But I guess you've got to do the same thing, but for like it's kind of mass spend, aiming at how your product is going to benefit people and be clever about it, stand out in a way that's sincere and still true to your brand values.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really key point, and one that often gets missed, and one that we've talked about many times on this podcast is that thing about being in touch with your audience and understanding what it is that what message you're trying to deliver to that said audience, rather than just trying to make noise, spending more money, or trying to outspend others, or it's going to be very easy to get lost in this advertiser space at this time. And I think creativity is another really crucial point that I'm not sure everyone always gets right. I saw recently, controversial potentially, it was featured on the Drum as the best advert they've seen about the Olympics yet, but it was the Coca-Cola advert. I don't know if you've seen it yet. I got the message. It was a kind of, it was about human connection. They had, I think it was a female South African swimmer. She was gearing up to do a race, and there was 4 of her biggest rivals. And then they started hugging before the race started. And then it cut to all these people around the world hugging and enjoying Coca-Cola. And it was all of that kind of like, let's drop rivalries. We're all together. I kind of got the sentiment behind the advert, but I'm not entirely sure it was the best way to execute it. Have you seen any ads so far that you could pick out that you think works?
I think I've probably only named 2 I've seen, which is the DFS having the athletes on the beds trying to get a decent nap before they all go and compete, which, absolutely relatable. And then a British gas advert, which I couldn't tell you an awful lot about it, apart from it said Olympics, it was barbecue and a British gas van turned up at the end. And that's about all I could tell you about it. But the Coca-Cola one's quite interesting, because having not seen it, it sounds like they're very much got into although it's kind of their new thing at Christmas was like all the social thing rather than just holidays are coming, they did the social thing. But it's also like almost a pivot back to their old advertising of Hands Around the World. So it's kind of it's a classic legacy of Coca-Cola with a modern spin, which is really quite interesting. But yeah, it's at least they're trying to do something that's different. They're trying to stand out. Whereas the fact we can't name any other adverts potentially says other people aren't doing it very well. Though, to be fair, we should probably mention there are some really hardcore restrictions the Olympics have got around advertising with them. Like, you have to be an official partner. Otherwise, you're not allowed to use certain imagery just before and just after the Olympics for so many days. And otherwise you can get in some quite serious trouble. So yeah, they're doing create this mini kind of environment ecosystem where you have to be a partner, and therefore you have to have a certain amount of money and pass whatever brand guidelines the Olympics deem fit these days and the IOC deems fit these days to be able to get into this game at all.
So I guess, we kind of summed it up there that potentially these big events are for the big brands, especially around that guidance. But is there a way that smaller brands can jump on the publicity that's going? I mean, they're not going to be able to afford to have, athletes in their ads, and also the fact they probably can't afford to use the Olympic brand as such. But can they be creative and just use the publicity surrounding the event to their own benefit?
Personally, I think the opportunity is in not using the event. If everyone wants to start, all the big brands are going to go into this one space and go, oh, we're all talking about this. As a small brand, push your niche. If you know you've got this a very specific thing you're doing as a smaller brand, advertise to that really directly, really specifically. Your competition from the big brands has probably moved away. Their PPC spend, for example, has probably moved away to an extent. Take this as an opportunity to go, you know what, this is where we can push harder at our good targeted advertising, because some of our competition, we're not competing against for a couple of weeks.
True. I did see, though, I did see a really great campaign. It was from the Migration Museum, and they weren't necessarily utilising the Euros or anything to do with the brand of the event, But they were jumping on the back of England's success so far, and they were running a really simple campaign that showed the starting 11 in the quarterfinals with all but 3 names crossed out with the words "England without immigration." And I just thought that that was a really clever way of jumping on something that's obviously everyone's talking about at the moment, England in a semi-final, but then delivering a powerful and simple message that that shows the benefits of immigration, but also I thought it was very clever in the fact, if one of those guys missed, let's face it, that racism in football is as bad as it's ever been, and it doesn't seem to be going away. And yet none of them missed, and they're all, everyone is, applauding and happy that they've got there. And I just thought that the way that they executed that, it didn't take a huge amount of budget. It was just very clever thinking, jumped on a social issue that was linked to their own brand. Do you think there's other ways that brands can be opportunistic in these big events that can help to promote them in a good way?
Yeah, I mean, that campaign you spoke about was genius. It's topical for the football. It's topical for immigration as a hot topic just before the general election. And it pushes a good social point, and also awesome for Saka stepping up and exercising those demons by getting that penalty in.
Or that penalty.
Yeah, it was brilliant. But it's a good example of how you can really, if you're really clear in your message, you can be quick and you can be nimble and say, this thing is happening right now, and actually it plays into this, and we can get it all out together. So if you are quick and you are agile, those smaller brands, yeah, there's definitely an opportunity to score points. I'd never heard of the Migration Museum before, but in that campaign, as you say, it's got really wide attention.
Yeah, it was really clever. Okay, so let's wrap it up quickly. What can people take away from, we started this segment talking about the lack of advertising. We've kind of brought it round to the fact that there are benefits and the big brands are involved. What one key takeaway can people listening get from the Olympics in general, the lack of or perceived lack of advertising, or the surge of advertising that's about to hit us as soon as the Euros finish and England win the Euros?
Yeah, we'll be optimistic. I think that for smaller kind of middle-sized brands that can't afford to throw money at sponsoring these big events and being part of the official partners and whatnot, be clever. You can still buy off the publicity. You just have to be careful with what imagery and wording you're using to make sure you don't fall out of official guidelines. But if you're like the Migration Museum, if you're quick and nimble and make sure what you're doing is topical, you can allude to things and be quite clever with that and still have a real big impact without having to spend those big bucks.
I think be truthful to yourself. You don't need to be in that arena if you don't need to be. It could be expensive. It could be detrimental if you get it wrong. You're playing in something that's got a lot of exposure. So just be true to your values. Understand your audience. Make sure that the message that you're going to put out there resonates and hits home in what could be a crowded environment.
Great, thanks Rich. Obviously we're recording this prior to our match against the Netherlands, but I'm confident we'll be going through to the finals and finally end this male trophy drought. We're now going to go over to Freya Willcocks, Digital Marketing Coordinator, to talk about the bops and flops of advertising at the moment. She's joined by myself and Paid Media Manager Michele Rafaelli.
Hi guys, so this is the part of the podcast that I've appropriately named Bops and Flops, and it's where we're going to be discussing those brands and those campaigns that we love and those we don't so much. So it's a weird time to be on social media at the moment. I don't know if anyone here who's listening is on TikTok, but if you're on TikTok, you'll have seen the political parties' social media war over TikTok, and if you don't know, I suggest you look it up. One that has gone particularly viral is the Labour Party don't wake up to 5 more years of Tories on Friday on TikTok, or the Conservative Party future tax DJ mix, also on TikTok. TikTok's a weird place to be at the moment. That being said, there are some amazing campaigns that are coming out right now from the likes of Monzo, Gymshark and Adidas, Monzo have gotten so confident in their brand campaign abilities that their LinkedIn bio has been changed to corporate content never felt like Monzo. So let's discuss. I'm going to kick it off with a brand that just seems to get it right every single time at the moment, and that's Gymshark. So there's no denying that Gymshark's marketing department is smashing at the moment. Recently, they've jumped on the Taylor Swift hype train with their Eras tour themed photo shoot, and their campaign that I've loved even more was their Do It for the Vine campaign promoting their latest summer sale. I think this campaign's a great example of cross-generation marketing with very clever marketing across the generations, and many of their athletes have a younger audience, but their Do It for the Vine social media campaign received great feedback across the board from all generations as it evoked a feeling of nostalgia, something we've talked about before in previous podcasts. So, Michele, have you got any campaigns that have stuck out to you recently?
Well, I like you mentioned the Gymshark one because it could explain how to Bops campaign, how you use this verb. But I've been following Gymshark for almost 10 years now for work reason. They were one of the main competitors of the company I used to work with. And monitoring them constantly throughout the years, I can say that they almost never failed a campaign. So one of the key elements to have a good campaign is consistency, and they've always managed to do that. This is the one that you made me think about. The one that I have in mind was Courage. That was for the Euro. This ad of the no distraction. So you see moment with salesperson in the shop, blindfolded, trying to sell products to clients. And that's the best campaign that I can remember this summer, in this most recent period. I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I haven't. That sounds really good. That I'll have to go give it a look. Tom, what about you? Have you got any campaigns you're loving at the moment?
Yeah, so one that I thought was really cool and interesting was the Prostate Cancer UK one. It has an older black man come down the stairs and there's a baby in his kitchen and the baby is talking to him, and it's his granddaughter from the future saying that they're going to get up to all sorts of antics, but he needs to be there for that to happen. So he needs to go and get a prostate check. And they very bluntly say that people of colour are twice as likely to get prostate cancer. And then they really emphasise that it's just a blood test. And I think that was a really good idea because I think a lot of men are a little bit anxious about anything to do with the prostate, just because those old adages about the doctor and the finger, and being able to sort of like allay those concerns by saying you can be checked with a blood test, it's worth going out, and then making that emotional connection with a granddaughter. I just thought it was a really, really clever campaign that has stuck with me.
That's amazing. And yeah, I agree. I think it's a really great campaign. Before seeing the advert, I wasn't aware that it was just a blood test. And I think that's something that is really important and should definitely be emphasised. Have you, I guess, Tom, you've just said, but is there any lessons that you guys think can be learned from these adverts? Michele, have you got any lessons that you think have stuck out to you?
You may not know, but I do like numbers and data. When we need to analyze this type of campaign, I always think the people behind it, what was their main objective? In the ad that Tom mentioned, I could see clearly the target audience. It was tailored in terms of the length and the content of the ad was really, really well prepared to hit a very specific target. You have, 50% chances to hit men, and then you need to narrow it down to hit men above 40 usually to start doing those tests. And then by numbers that Black population, it's more exposed. So that's the thought at the beginning, and then they produced that ad that I think worked really well. Even for white people, it could have worked. On the other side, when you think a failure campaign, you need to see how many. I'd like to see the numbers to see after these ads have been aired, how many people start booking tests, and that's what would really tell us if the ad worked or not.
If you didn't already know, and if you hadn't listened to a previous podcast episode, Michele is the king of numbers and data. And it is a consistent theme in every podcast episode. Tom, do you feel like you've learned anything from any of these campaigns recently?
It's not something that I've learned necessarily, but it's something that's been reinforced, and that is just making that emotional connection to the audience. Like, I don't know if you'd have just had somebody stand on screen and say, you could get prostate cancer, and if you're black, you're 50% more likely to. I don't know if that would have had the same impact as, like, you have a future to live for, and your family would like you to be a part of that in the future, so you should go and get checked out. I think that more emotional connection, especially for men who don't necessarily consider that sort of thing. I feel like typically we are less future planning, although that's a very stereotypical comment, I know. I think we don't think about as much future planning. It's much more the here and the now, and making you stop and think about that. I thought that for me, that was just really powerful. So that's something that I will continue to try and incorporate into everything that I do.
That's really great. I really do think that making an emotional connection is so important. And it's something that when you make that really strong emotional connection, it will resonate with your audience for longer than the advert is around. And it will be something that will stick with them for you never know how long, depending on how deeply it resonated with them. So on a more potentially light-hearted note, is there any campaigns that, I don't know, maybe you expected to be really great, but left a sour taste in your mouth, or maybe it was just downright awful? Mine is a bit of a bizarre one, and I actually think it is a really great advert, but it just didn't hit the spot for me. I don't know if anyone's seen the Burger King, the board through, connecting boarding Brazilians and the drive-through. It's, as a whole, the advert is great, and it is just a really good advert. It's really fun. It communicates their point really well, and I think it will do what they want the advert to do. However, I cannot get past the connection of hair and fast food. I'll hold my hands up and say that I am a bit of a germaphobe. I'm the type of person to look at a Google review and see if anyone's got food poisoning at a restaurant lately. And I can confidently say that after watching that advert, I have never wanted a Burger King less in my life. So has anyone else got any adverts that maybe, I don't know, gave them the ick, or that they felt just missed the mark?
So one that bugs me, and I can't quite explain why, is the Google Pixel 8 adverts. When they're changing the faces in the photographs, I find that problematic, I guess, from a moral point of view. I think changing photographs in that way and altering what a memory is and what a photograph is, I think that has huge implications that we really haven't started to consider yet. And I mean, I know that photographs, especially those taken on camera phones nowadays, there's so much computational photography at work that it's not accurately capturing the moment anyway. But we're now talking about deleting things, changing faces, making people smile, opening their eyes, all of those sorts of things. And it just moves moments away from being authentic to this artificial idea of what a computer thinks you want to remember instead. And I just can't quite get on board with that. And this is someone who owns a Pixel 8, but I just never use the feature.
Fair enough. And Michele, have you got an answer now that Tom's stolen yours?
I have the same feeling of Tom. When I saw this ad, and I'm thinking, why they want to sell me the phone to change reality? I mean, we know it's a phone. Apple invented already all the ways to sell the emotion and the services and not the machine itself. But when you see how they can change reality, make you, I think the one Tom is related is the one that they are trying to jump playing at basket, and they can remove the person and then move it higher, or that's not reality. Why do I want something not real to be the main selling proposition of a phone? I remember one of the other features is this person on the beach, and then she can change the lightning and the mood and the clouds. So it seems that she was taking the picture at 4 a.m. when the sun was coming up. If you want to take a picture at that time, you wake up, you go there and get a picture. If you stay in bed till 10 and then you want to have a picture with the sun rising, you don't deserve it. So that's the ad that I didn't like from Google. But at the same time, Google has a very good ad which runs only in cinemas, which is about the noise cancelling feature. So these things that you can cancel people in your picture, you can do it also with sounds now. And the way the ad is produced for the unique placement of a cinema, that I think for the Pixel 8 is on the other side of the spectrum. It's very smart, and I liked the way they did it. And they show me a real usage on real life without manipulate what reality is.
So that's great. I guess it is just about considering what the use of the product's going to be, and maybe they just missed the mark with moving the guy around the basketball net. I've actually not seen that. I've not seen either of those adverts. I've seen the ones where they resize footballers' heads and stuff like that. I think that's Google Pixel. And then last but not least, is there a specific brand that you would love to work with to create a campaign? A brand that I personally love to work with is The Ordinary. It's a skincare brand that has just, I think, a really great brand message, and I use a lot of their products and align with their morals. I'd also love to work with Loop, the earplug brand, if anyone's heard of that. I'm waiting till Prime Day to buy myself a pair again, but I love the idea behind the brand and all the work that they do. So what about you guys?
So we spoke about them in one of the last podcasts, but I'd be really interested to actually be on set with Dove to see whether or not their ethos of inclusivity and body positivity and acceptance actually carries through their whole ad creation process, or whether or not it's used more for the end message marketing. I'd just be really interested to see how they actually incorporate that into their workflow. And I suppose from a more selfish perspective, I'd quite like to advertise with like a car brand where I can just go and drive through Italian mountainsides or something like that in, and that I won't fit in a Lamborghini, but a nice car would be pretty exciting as well.
Dove is a really great one. Obviously I don't work for Dove, so I can't confirm anything internal, but I have a couple of friends who are influencers and they've worked with Dove, and their messaging is very much body positivity and inclusivity, and they've gone to brand events and stuff like that, and it seems that message does run through to their core, and it sings true to their core. What about you, Michele? Any brands?
It's not really a brand, but I'd love to do anything with some Irish brand. I think with their sort of humor, you could get away with anything you're advertising, and you could really have fun exploring all the possibility options. The brand that I thought immediately when I saw your question is Hennessy cognac. I think selling that type of drink is very difficult and challenging, because it's something that it's quite expensive. It's in a way luxury brand, but you don't have to stick to the standard way of selling a product, and you can go a bit more wild. And that's what I'd like to as a challenge for a brand campaign.
That's great. Well, you heard it here first. If you're Irish or you're Hennessy, Michele would love to work with you. That's all for my section of the podcast. Although one thing that has just popped into my head is if you guys want a very unique example of some branding that's done really well recently, I would encourage you to look at Charlie XCX's new album, Brat, and look at the way that her use of this one neon green has somehow coined the use of that neon green for everybody. And her marketing is just incredible, and her use of user-generated content is top tier. Right, thanks everyone for being on my episode.
So that's all we've had time for today. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you found some useful snippets in our session and are able to go and put them into your own marketing strategy. We love that you've made it this far through your listen, and we love making this content for you. So if you could recommend the show to one friend that you think would enjoy it, we'd be exceptionally grateful. Alternatively, if you've hated this podcast, then send it to someone you don't like. Thank you to all of the Brew Digital team for their research and input in today's session. Make sure to check out our past episodes and subscribe on whatever platform you listen to your podcasts on, and we will see you on the next one. I have not been Hayden, but these have been the marketers of the universe.